Welcome to another episode of It's a Long Beach Thing. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and like us on Facebook on It's a Long Beach Thing. You can pitch your business, you can pitch things about Long Beach. We don't care as long as it's about Long Beach. We have a great show for you today. I am honored that I get to have the voice of Long Beach on the podcast today, Randy Gordon. Randy, how are you this morning?
Good morning to you, Paul. Thanks for inviting me.
I appreciate it. When I envisioned this podcast that I've done a few years ago, I envisioned having you as one of the guests because of your roots with the chamber and so many else things that you do for Long Beach. I needed to have you on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. How do you want me to begin, Paul?
Well, let's start here. How does somebody from Lukenbach, Texas, end up in the Long Beach area?
All right. Well, the first thing I need to do is respectfully correct you. I am from Lubbock, Texas, but Lukenbach does sound better because that was in the song, as you know.
Yeah.
But I was born and raised in Lubbock, and I came here west with my family in 1967, right out of high school. And I went to Cerritos College for a couple of years, and then I graduated Cal State Fullerton. I wish it would have been Long Beach State if I had to do it again. I went to Cerritos College, then I went to Long Beach State. If I had to do it over again, it'd be Long Beach City College in Long Beach State, because at the time I didn't know I'd wind up in Long Beach. But I was the chamber CEO, president CEO of the Covina Chamber for 12 years. And that's kind of where I got my start. I don't have time to go into, it was a real fluke how I got that job. But so I got that job. I fell in love with the chamber business. And I just felt like I was put on this earth to run a chamber of commerce. And so I came from, in 1994, a lady named Diane Creel, who was pretty famous for Long Beach at the time, who ran Earth Tech. She was the first woman in the history of the United States to run a big engineering company. And so she hired me. She was the chair of the board. So she hired me, and I started April 4th, 1994. That turned out to be the best job of my career. And it was just an amazing step. People would say, well, what would it like going from Covina, it has 40,000 people at the time and a very small chamber, to running a chamber at that time might have had 1,000 members. And I said, well, it was kind of like you're pitching on the mound at Little League game, and then all of a sudden you're pitching in a major league game. So it was quite a jump for me, but it worked out. And I worked hard, and I commuted back to Covina for a long time before I moved to Long Beach. Then my son was going to go to Long Beach State, and I didn't want him to make that same commute that I made. And so I moved here because I didn't want him to commute. And I lived in Bixby Village, and he walked to Long Beach State from Bixby Village to school. And so the chamber was just a great job for me. I ran it for 26 years. You know, in the chamber world, you get a new boss every year. You get a new chairman every year. And even though you legally work for a board of directors, you kind of work for the chairman. So you have a different management style every year. So think about getting a new boss every single year for 26 consecutive years. Quite frankly, it was really 40 years or 38 years because I had 12 bosses in Covina. Well, you have to change and adapt to their management style. Some of them are very hands-on, and some of them are micromanagers. Fortunately, I got some really good ones here. And for example, I had two CEOs of the hospital. So two of my chairs ran the hospital. So they were the #1 CEO of Long Beach Memorial Hospital. So they have a $1 billion company to run. So they're not really hands-on, and they don't try to micromanage. But as the years went on, I was able to pretty much get on my board who I wanted to be my chair. You know, a good chamber CEO across the country will put in place the right volunteers. He doesn't necessarily choose his boss, but he puts them in place so they could be in a position to one day become his chair. Because that is really important because you work so closely together. And so I had some great staff along the years. Sean Lamaki, who a lot of people know in the community, who was killed tragically, he and Robert Garcia, the current congressman, they started Long Beach Post. So I was able to hire Sean for 2.5 years, and he was one of the best employees I ever had. I had another employee, Ryan Alsop, who now was the #1 guy in Bakersfield County. Now is the #1 administrator for the city of Napa. And so I had some great employees. Janet Wynn, who's currently a state assembly member, was a state senator running for Orange County supervisor. She worked for me for a couple of years. So along the way, I had some great employees, and one of those employees is still there. And her name is Judy Nelson, and she was there when I got there in April 4th of 1994, and she's still there today. But I had some great teams along the way. I got really involved in the community. I just jumped in with both feet, all kinds of boards. I've been on so many boards I can't even count them all. And but I'll talk about a couple that are very special to me. But I really felt like I need to give back to the community. The more I got involved in nonprofits, it's not that the nonprofits gave the chamber a lot of money. They might be a member, but the board members of those nonprofits were a lot of business people. So it made a lot of sense for me as a chamber CEO to get involved in nonprofits. And I became president of Rotary. I was president of the Rotary Club in Covina. And then I was lucky enough to be the president of Long Beach Rotary in 2004-05. It's a July through June year. And I was a centennial president. That was the year that Rotary International was 100 years old. So that was kind of special. And I got to go to a convention in Osaka, Japan. And so Rotary meant a lot to me. I was retiring for 30 years. I recently moved to St. George, Utah, where I joined the Rotary Club there. And I'm there half the year, and I'm here half the year in Huntington Beach, California, where I'm speaking to now. But anyway, so Rotary's been a big part of my life, 30 years of retiring. But the other couple of charities, I was involved in the building of the Ronald McDonald House, and I was one of the original board members. My wife and I sponsored room #1, which will have our name on it for life. And I was really in a great position to hire Sherry Basley, who ran the Ronald McDonald House for about 15 years. And now she's the executive director of Precious Lamb Preschool. And I'll get to that. But the Ronald McDonald House was really the first charity where I just absolutely fell in love with, heads over heels. And it was almost like God put me on this earth to be on the Ronald McDonald board. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that at the time, I have 6 grandkids. And at the time, my grandkids were 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And now they're 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. So they're stepped, and that's kind of cool. But anyway, because the Ronald McDonald House is a safe haven for a mom and dad who has a critically ill son or daughter at the Millward Children's Hospital right across the street. And it's a great place for them to stay while their child is across the street. And I just felt, what if it was my grandchild that was in the hospital? So I love that charity, and then I still do. But the other charity I got involved in, I rolled off the board after 9 years, because that term limits. And I became involved in Precious Lamb Preschool. And Precious Lamb Preschool is a homeless school for children experiencing homelessness from 18 months to 5 years. And it really captured my heart. And so I was on that board for 12 years. I was the chair for about 4 years. And it's just a very special place. Can you imagine a homeless mother who either sleeps in her car, or maybe she sleeps in the streets, or she might be at the Lydia House. A lot of the referrals come from the Lydia House which is part of the Long Beach Rescue Mission. And their child is in school during the day, and they get the only great meal they get is that day. So they get healthy lunch and snacks that day, and it might be the only meal of the day in times. So it just really, and those mothers have their own issues at times, and they're recovering alcoholic, or recovering a drug addict, or their husband, beat up on them. So there's lots of sadness. But these kids who have almost nothing, what's really special, these kids don't know that. And we give them a lot of love and attention, and make a difference in their life, kind of like one child at a time. And we are the only faith-based preschool for children experiencing homelessness in Southern California, faith-based. There's another one in Long Beach called Children Today, great school, but they're not faith-based. So those 2 charities occupied a lot of my time. But along the way, right before I came to Long Beach, I had a board member who ran a local McDonald's, and they had a big event in Industry Hills called Big Mac Under Glass, where they actually served you a Big Mac under glass. They had other food too, but so her auctioneer got sick and she asked me to fill in. I had never, ever dreamed about being an auctioneer, never. And I was scared to death. And I did that. And on the way home, I said to my wife, you know, I think I could do this. And I did a couple in Covina, but when I got to Long Beach, you know, there were so many auctions, and I, over the years, kind of became the Long Beach auctioneer. And by the way, I never charged a penny for any of the charities when I was the CEO of the chamber. I'm retired now for 4 years. I retired in 2020. So now I charge, but I charge about a third of what the normal auctioneer would charge based in Southern California. But anyway, I became an auctioneer. I've done over 450 nonprofit gigs. I'm here in Huntington Beach, California for 2 months because I have 6 auction gigs here. And I've raised over $10 million. And I just feel like it, almost like God put me on earth to take people's money. and I did that at the chamber, and I do it here. But the difference is, I know who has money, and if I'm looking at a crowd, and I know they have the money, and I know this is their number one charity, you know. So if you a perfect dream is someone with the funding that has it, and this is their best charity, and they really want to support this charity. And so I'm winding down in my auction career of gosh, 30 years now, and I might do it for another year, but at some point I'm going to retire from that. And you know, there's a lot of young auctioneers out there in Southern California, and I'm 75, and even though I think I still have a lot of energy for a 75-year-old guy, it's starting to I'm starting to lose business to young, good-looking men, and that's okay, because my first auction I was probably 42. I got the job here when I was 45. And so I've had my share. So anyway, that's kind of in a nutshell, my Long Beach connection. Along the way, just a little personal thing in. I got a divorce after 27 years. The good Lord brought me this wonderful woman named Nancy Becker into my lives. She worked at Extension Services. I was on the second floor mezzanine at Long Beach, at the Trade Center in Long Beach, World Trade Center. And her office was just down the pathway a little bit. And we met and we fell in love. And she was also married 27 years, divorced. And so we just fell in love with each other. And we've been together 25 years now. And we, like I said, we have 6 grandkids. And I'll leave with this. I have, right now I have a senior, a junior, a sophomore, and a freshman grandchild in 4 different high schools. I have 4 different caps for Ocean View, Maricosta, Long Beach Wilson, and Los Al. And I have 4 sweatshirts. And 5 of the 6 play sports. And the other one that doesn't play sports is an actress. So that's kind of my Long Beach story. Hope I didn't go too long.
Wow, a lot to dive into. So, you talked about getting into Cerritos and then going to Cal State Fullerton. How does
Right.
one get involved with the chamber? You said you were involved with the Covina Chamber. How did you get involved with it? How did that all come about? Because that's kind of a unique
Well,
thing.
it's just kind of a fluke. I'll give you an example. Um, I was working for a small company in Covina, and I was in my 30s. Um, and I just left Montgomery Ward. After my first career was 10 years in Montgomery Ward. I was the youngest member of the Montgomery Ward regional staff in Oakland for 10 years. And I left, the region disbanded. And so they disbanded the region and went from just corporate to store level. And I wasn't happy at the store level. So I left Montgomery Ward after 10 years. And then I was working for a small business and in Covina. And I was up north and I moved back down to Covina, West Covina, where I was from. I was living in West Covina. And my kids went to Covina High School. And so one day I was unemployed, and I was at 33 years old, first time I've been unemployed in my life. I refused to accept unemployment. I wanted to jump back into something. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was on the chamber board of directors because I worked for Montgomery Ward before. And then I went up north and I came back down. But anyway, I had a few friends that were on the board for the chamber of Covina. And I went to Rotary one day and I sat next to the chair of the chamber. If I had not sat next to him, who knows if I'd be talking about this today. But he says, I said, in those days, everybody wore a suit and tie. And I went to work kind of like this to Rotary. He goes, "You off today?" I go, "Oh man, I'm really off. I'm completely off. I'm unemployed." And he said, "Really?" He goes, "Well, you don't know this, but our CEO is going to be leaving, and they haven't told the board yet." And so he goes, "I think you'd be good at this." I had no idea. So the CEO left of the chamber, and they interviewed me. And in those days, there's no such thing as a search committee or search. In those days, the chair of the board would just say, "You're hired. I'll tell the board later." I mean, it was kind of loose in those days, but that's how I got the job. And I still feel today, if I hadn't went to Rotary that day, and I wasn't feeling too good, I was unemployed, and I said, I don't know if I want to tell anybody. And so that's how I got the job in Covina. It's just the world is full of fine lines like that and odd occurrences.
I love that you just said that right now, because when people are unemployed or lose their job, there's a you feel bad. You feel like there's something wrong with you, that you got laid off, and it could be nothing that
Right.
you did wrong. So it's very embarrassing to share that information, but you were vulnerable. And as
Right.
you being vulnerable led you into this new stratosphere that you would never have done if you were not vulnerable in that moment to say, you know what, unemployed. Because there's so many people out there that would want to help you. You never know. So that's a great lesson right there. Is vulnerability could be a strength, not a weakness.
Yeah, it's life is full of little twists like that. So that's kind of my Long Beach story. I'd probably left something out. Is there any other questions you want to ask me about the Long Beach story?
Kind of. I kind of want to go back a ways, because you mentioned Texas, and then you go to Southern California. You had to have been very young at the time. What was the reasoning? I'm assuming you went with your family. What was the reasoning that you went from Texas to Southern California?
Well, my dad was a farmer near Lubbock, Texas, and he had got hailed out, snow hail, little balls of hail. You may not, we may not know what that is in California. And he lost some crops, and he had some tough times. And my my uncle was a big shot at North American Rockwell in Downey, and he got me a job at 18 years old, and my dad got a job at McDonnell Douglas. So my dad had a job pretty much lined up. So the whole family came west with my two brothers. My dad worked for McDonnell Douglas, and I went to work for North American Rockwell in Downey when they had like 40,000 people. And I was an apprentice electrician. I didn't want to be an electrician, but that job opened up, and I sort of changed light bulbs. And it was a very strong union, the IBEW union, and we were the only ones who changed a light bulb. You know, how many electricians does it take to change a light bulb? But anyway, so I worked that job, and then I had a curve. So I went to school, and I got a 2S front from Cerritos, and I was working full time in North American Rockwell, going to school. Well, that didn't work out very well. So my grades weren't that great because I was working full time job. I remember bragging to my friends back in Texas, I'm making $100 a week, and I thought I was hot stuff, man, making $100 a week. And so then I quit employment and went part-time job somewhere, and I graduated Cerritos, and I was on the honor roll, whatever that was, back in those days. Uh, all the all the semesters after, but when I stopped working, my grades got obviously better. And so I graduated from Cerritos, and actually, I'm very pleased that I'm in the Hall of Fame for Cerritos. I'm on the Hall of Fame category of distinguished alums, and I'm the seventh alum in that category. So that was a few years ago. I'm very honored to be in the Cerritos Hall of Fame. And then from there, I went to Fullerton because I had no Long Beach connection in those days. Like I said earlier, I wish it would have been Long Beach City College, and I wish it would have been Long Beach State. And I graduated Fullerton with a BA in history because I was going to teach. And I was doing some student teaching in Foothill High School in Orange County, and just sort of got turned off to the strict education uh, policies at the time. And so then I wound up working, for a career for the chamber, 38 years in the chamber business.
Mm. What would you say to somebody, because being an auctioneer, I know you went over that story, which I would really appreciate that you went through that story about being an auctioneer. You just kind of fell into it, like you fell into the chamber. What would you say to somebody that would want to get into being an auctioneer? What are the qualities that you need to possess to do that kind of work?
Well, number one, you got to be completely unabashed about asking people for money. And as an auctioneer, you walk a fine line, being too aggressive, not being assertive at all. But here's the thing, if you know your audience and you know the people, it really helps. Somewhere I read, someone said to me once, the most beautiful sound to the human ear is the sound of your own name. And I think as an auctioneer, if someone's bidding on an item, for example, thank you, Paul. Thank you, thank you. But Paul, she just outbid you. Now, Paul, if you give me one more bid, the odds are really good you might get it. So you walk that fine line. Sometimes I might say, Paul, do you want to wake up in the middle of the night and we should have bought this item?
Mm.
So those little things you sort of manufacture over the years. I did go to school to get my BAS, which is I'm a member of the National Auctioneers Association, and they have a designation called BAS, which is Benefit Auctioneer Specialist. So what happens is this is charity only. See, I only do charity auctions. I don't do car auctions, real estate auctions, that kind of stuff, because the chant is a lot different with those guys. You've seen car 800. We don't do that. As a benefit auctioneer specialist, you can't do that because you're dealing with senior citizens who don't know what you said, and so your whole tone is a little different. But so I do charity work only, and if you love people and you're unabashed for asking for money, and you're very outward, you got to be type A, you got to have a lot of energy. You can really get into the auction. I'm self-taught. The National Auctioneer Association didn't teach me how to be an auctioneer. I was an auctioneer for maybe 25 years before I joined them. I was just self-taught. And then you would go to other events and you'd watch other auctioneers and you'd kind of pick up things that you liked, what they did. And so it's been a great career, kind of two careers simultaneously. But it was just a natural thing for me as a chamber CEO to help these nonprofits out. And it helped my relationship with the executive director of that charity, especially when I did it for free. They loved that. They didn't love it when I retired and all of a sudden, oh, it's not free anymore. Anyway, so it was a great career. So I kind of had two careers.
Well, the two things that are connected to that is public speaking. That
Right.
is something that you've done. It sounds like all your career, and you're very strong at it. Obviously, you can't be the voice of Long Beach without being the strength of public speaking. Going forward, I guess as a teacher, teachers are pretty good public speaking.
Right.
So was that always something that was in your blood that you were a good public speaker, or is this something you developed through the years of trial and error?
I don't think I was born with it. My dad was not a public speaker, quite the opposite. I think when it first helped me is in 1975, and I have a plaque somewhere in my garage in St. George, Utah, hidden away in a box somewhere. I was the Toastmaster of the Year in 1975 at the Bellflower Toastmasters. So Toastmasters was really good for me in the beginning. I wasn't necessarily a public speaker in high school, even though I did get the lead in a play called The Late Mr. Early. But I think Toastmasters had a lot to do with it. And then getting the Covina job, I wasn't a great public speaker when I got the Covina chamber job. But being in that role, it forces you to be a pretty good public speaker. But it's just sort of a natural thing. You know, it just came out.
And now that you've retired in 2020, obviously slowing it down a little bit. I know you're still doing some auctioneer stuff, but you even said that you're even slowing that down. What is your vision for the Long Beach Chamber going forward and Long Beach itself? I know that you probably have you put your life and blood into the chamber and to the city for close to 30 years. So I'm sure you have visions on where you see the city and the chamber going in the future.
Well, first of all, I got really lucky. I hired a young man 4 years before he took over from me. I call it the longest succession plan in the history of Chamber of Commerce. It was kind of a 7-year succession plan. He had worked with Sean Lamaki and both Jeremy Harris, who I'm talking about, and Sean Lamaki were very close friends, and they were like third and fourth sons to me. I have 2 sons, and they were like sons to me. And Jeremy went to work for me. I actually stole him from the Garden Grove Chamber, and he moved over as my senior vice president for the chamber. And he was our first ever senior vice president in that role. But I knew that he could one day take over my job. So he worked for us for 4 years. The board loved him. And so when I went to retire 3 years out, we almost lost him. And he was part of the top 3 of Irvine Chamber. And one day I woke up and said, I don't want to lose this young man to Irvine. I don't want him to leave. He's been with me 4 years. I love this guy. And so I went in the office and I said, Jeremy, what can I do for you to withdraw from the top 3 of the Irvine Chamber? And he looked at me and he says, well, are you really going to retire? And my contract, I had a 7-year contract, was up 2020, June of 2020. And this was 3 years out. So this was 2017, 2016. So anyway, I said, okay, what if I say to you, I'm going to retire June 30, 2020? What can we do at that point? He goes, well, I want the board to make sure that I'm in position. I don't want them to have to go to the search committee. And he wanted a few little bumps in salary and that kind of thing. So I made a decision to retire 3 years out because I would have lost him. I'm convinced I'll go to my grave thinking he would have got that job in Irvine. So I wanted to keep him. So I went to my board and my chair, and John Dusenberry for UPS was the chair, and said, do you really want to do this? I said, yeah, I'm ready to hang it up. Of course, I didn't know COVID was coming, so it was kind of perfect. I worked from home my last 3 or 4 months as a chamber CEO, which was kind of sad. I didn't get my roast that they were going to do for me. I wasn't able to say goodbye at the gala, which hurt, but I wound up saying goodbye virtually in 2021. Jeremy gave me an opportunity to wait until 22, but I said, nah, it's 2 years out. So I said goodbye in front of a few hundred people that might be tuning in on a Zoom call. So that was kind of sad, but I love Jeremy Harris. He's doing a great job. He's been there 4 years now, and he'll take that chamber to new heights. He already has. I got the job at 45. He got the job at 41. I will always tell him, you beat me to it. You got this great position at 41. But he'll do a great job, and he gets along with the city well, and that's not always easy to do because of politics. And I don't want to get into politics now, but there's a lot of politics running a chamber, and so it's a tough job, but it's a very rewarding job. Helping small business survive and helping them grow, and then working with large companies. The one thing I loved about the job, what job can you have where I might be having lunch with Bob Maxon, the former president of Long Beach State, and then the same day, I'm having breakfast with Diane Creel, who runs, at one time, $100 million engineering company called EarthTech, and then speaking in front of Good Afternoon Long Beach or Good Morning Long Beach at the time with small businesses. You got the whole spectrum of really getting to know people in high positions, elected officials. Like I introduced Arnold Schwarzenegger 3 or 4 times when he was in Long Beach. I got to meet a lot of famous people. I met past presidents, Bill Clinton and Rudy Giuliano and all kinds of famous people who came to Long Beach. So it was a great job and a great, well, it lasted. I loved it for 26 years.
That ties into a quote that is famous for you. Jerry Garcia's quote, but it kind of ties into what you're talking about. Can you tell us that quote that you love that you talk about quite a bit?
Well, I was never a big Jerry Garcia fan, even though I had some of his ties. But I probably wore his ties after he died. But he had this one quote that I just loved. It said, "Somebody's got to do something, and it's incredibly pathetic that it has to be us." And I used to tell the board of directors, look, there's 21 board of directors. I was convener, but in Long Beach we had 51. So there's 51 board of directors. And if anybody cares more, nobody cares more about the business community than the board of directors. So I kind of used that and I reversed it by saying, somebody's got to do something about the business climate in Long Beach. And it's incredibly fortunate that it has to be you, because nobody cares more about the business community than the board of directors of the chamber. And so, yeah, that's where that quote came from. I'm amazed you found that somewhere. It's amazing what you can find when you Google people.
Well, where's the future for Randy Gordon?
Well, I'm going to live half my year in Huntington Beach because I have 6 grandkids, and 2 of them are playing baseball season from February, March, April. And they're both pretty good, and they both might play college ball, so it's kind of exciting. But I want to be here to watch my grandkids kind of grow up some more, even though they're 4 in high school. But I also love St. George. The problem with St. George, I have a beautiful home that would cost 3 times as much here. The tax base there is incredibly low. I was paying $20,000 a year on my taxes that I sold in April of this year in Bay Harbor, $20,000. I'm paying $2,600 on a home that's bigger and more custom built. That's beautiful. And I love St. George. They welcome me with open arms. It's a growing community. A lot of Southern California people have moved to St. George. Have some Long Beach connections in St. George, but I'll go back and forth. It's a 6-hour drive, so I'll be going back and forth a lot. They do have direct flights now from St. George to LAX. So I'm not abandoning Long Beach, but I'm cutting back. And, right now I'm not on any boards. I left all my boards, so I'm not on any boards. So being on a board in Long Beach is probably not going to happen again. And I'll find a new charity that I'll hang my hat on that speaks to my heart in St. George, Utah. People there are very, very friendly. I just love it there. I don't love July and August, so we won't live there in July and August because it gets pretty hot. But it's a beautiful city with red cliffs, and it's a great city. So I'll go back and forth.
Thank you, Randy, for sharing your story. But before you go, because I know you have some answers for me. Where are some good places to eat around town that you like in Long Beach?
Oh boy, over the years, I've eaten at a lot of restaurants, and a lot of those restaurants are gone. My all-time favorite restaurant that was right around the corner from my house in Bay Harbor closed during COVID, called Picarelli's.
Mm.
I love Picarelli's. It's a couple doors down from another great restaurant, Enrique's. I love Enrique's. Of course, we lived around the corner. So I think for 4 years in a row on New Year's Eve, we walk over from our home to Picarelli's, maybe stagger a little bit on the way back home for New Year's Eve. And we do the same for Valentine's Day. It was just so nice and convenient. But I miss that. They had the best pork chop I've ever had in my life. Now, ever since then, my wife accuses me of being on a pork chop. So if anybody listening to this, if you think your restaurant or one of your restaurants has a great pork chop, you just let me know, because I'm a pork chop aficionado. But I did find, but I haven't found a great pork chop yet in Long Beach. But I love. I still have lunch a lot of places in Long Beach. It's hard to beat 555. I had lunch there this week. Just a classic restaurant. It hasn't maybe changed much over the years. Great service. I love 555 and King's Fish. I ate there a lot too. But I also love the little places. My little favorite breakfast place was the local spot. which is ironically on the corner where Piccarelli's was, because I used to walk over there for breakfast. But I love small business owners who dive into trying to run a restaurant. It's very difficult. I would never do it myself. The margins are thin, the competition is crazy, and the wages are higher than most other states. The local stores don't have to pay $20 an hour because they don't have 60 stores or whatever that is for California. But those are some of my highlights. But I will tell you, right now, the best burger in Long Beach, in my opinion, is California Beach Kitchen. If you don't believe me, you try it. I like that place too. I miss my old stomping ground. My go-to place was Ruby's, and on near Second and PCH, and they closed and they're gone. But those are some of the places that I like. 908's a nice place too for lunch. I like 908. And then if I'm just really in for a hearty breakfast, I love Hoff's on Bellflower Boulevard.
Mm.
And
Some
I hope restaurant owners are not listening because I didn't mention their name. But oh, and the other great restaurant is John Morris's place, and the water on the water,
the boathouse.
the boathouse in the bay. That's a
Yeah.
great restaurant too. So there's a lot of great restaurants in Long Beach, a lot of them.
Yeah. You mentioned Piccarelli's. It's a shame that the owner passed away. I think that's the reason why the restaurant went out, correct?
You know, God rest his soul, Joe Piccarelli had a heart condition. He died 3 days after they closed this restaurant. I talked to him the day before he closed. They made him close on St. Patty's Day. They closed the restaurants the day before St. Patty's Day. That might have been the 16th of March, 2020. 3 days later, he had a heart attack. I think it just put him over the top. He was a stress kind of guy anyway, with a lot of stress. Running a restaurant, a lot of stress. But yeah, I miss Joe, and I met his brother still around, Frank Piccarelli, still is around. But yeah, that's kind of sad. Some of the restaurants in the past, like Da Vinci's, I used to love Da Vinci's. On Spring at the airport. Dave Neary had that. And so I've seen a lot of them come and go. And it's kind of sad when you really like a restaurant and it leaves you.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a lot of stuff by Bay Harbor. Did you ever go to Gaslamp and catch a cover concert on Saturday night?
No, I didn't do that. And it was kind of sad I didn't do that because I was right around the corner from that. But I've been there for some events. And yeah, Long Beach is really fortunate to have a lot of great restaurants.
Absolutely. Well, Randy, it's been great to get to know you a little bit more. I'm so happy that you came on the podcast, and thank you for sharing your love for Long Beach with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Paul, and talking about a small world. Think about this, Paul. If we hadn't sat next to each other last Thursday night at the Long Beach City College Hall of Fame, that's when we first met, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So it was meant to be, Paul.
It definitely was meant to be because I had a vision of having you on, and that was the way I was able to do it. So great things happen.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's a great service for the community, Paul. Keep up the good work. And I
Thank
hope
you,
to see you
Randy.
soon. I hope to sit next to you soon at an event in the future.
Absolutely. Actually, my parents are going to an event that I think you're the auctioneer at, A Few Good Men. So I know that they're looking forward to that event.
Actually, I'm not the auctioneer at that one, but I will be there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I was the auctioneer for about 3 years, and they're honoring women this year. Men, and for the first time ever, they're honoring men and women. So it's not instead of a few good men, it's a few good men and women. And the committee felt like that they wanted to hire a woman auctioneer. So I lost the gig to a woman auctioneer, and I know her too. She's very good at what she does, and so sometimes change is good.
I agree. I agree. Well, it's been a Long Beach thing.